Good evening. Welcome to Resource PNG. On tonight's lineup, we have a presentation by Sam Akoitai, Director of Marengo and former mining minister who is also an industry advisor. Mr. Akoitai reflects on his time spent as an employee of the Bougainville copper mine and the lessons we can learn from the manner in which the mine was operated. Mr. Akoitai's presentation was part of a media workshop that was organized by the PNG Chamber of Mines and Petroleum in an effort to assist journalists and the media in general to report adequately on the mining and oil and gas sectors. Also on the show is an interview with Hugh Jones, an expert in mine closure who also tells us his personal story of how mine closure affected him and his family. But first, we take a look at this presentation by Sam Akoitai with a brief introduction on the media workshop by Brian Gomez.
A media workshop organised by the PNG Chamber of Mines and Petroleum was held in Madang in May 2014. The media workshop saw presentations from various leaders in the extractive sector of PNG. According to Brian Gomez, one of the workshop's organisers, the initial idea behind the workshop was assisting journalists and the media in general in adequately reporting on what is happening in the resource sector, and to allow the industry to explain itself better.
Initially, there was this idea that we want to help the journalists and the media generally to upgrade skills, and we know how difficult it is for many of you because I don't think there's any journalist in PNG that only covers the resources sector. So there's a lot of things that you have to cover, and it's almost even in the resources sector, people spend a lifetime doing very tiny disciplines. So it's so much harder for you when you've got to cover agriculture one day and fisheries another day, and and some social issues another day, and then it's hard to become experts in this. So one of our hopes was that through these media workshops, we can have interaction at a level that helps to enhance your knowledge and also gives the industry an opportunity to explain itself better.
One of the important highlights of the workshop was made by Sam Akoitai, a former politician and a former employee of the Bougainville copper mine, who made a moving personal reflection on the Bougainville mine. During his reflection, he recalled the Bougainville arrangement to be a good arrangement for the country, but was not a good one for the people of Bougainville, as very little money was flowing back to the landowners. Furthermore, Mr. Akoitai also went on to say that Bougainville was one of the best managed copper mines, which not only prioritized Bougainvillians for employment, but employed Papua New Guineans. With this Bougainville experience, he has also posed a challenge to other landowners in presently operated projects to not only think of themselves first, but to also consider others when it comes to benefits.
So the Bougainville arrangement, from my own, and I stand to be corrected on the issues that I'm going to speak on. Bougainville arrangement was a good arrangement for the country, but it was not a good arrangement for the people of Bougainville. And that's the reason why they decided that enough was enough. Money was being earned in Bougainville, but not much was actually put back into the province that was providing the revenue for the country. And that's the reason why other Bougainvilleans, apart from the landowners, decided to take up arms against the state and the company. I can say from my own recollection from being involved in Bougainville Copper, Bougainville Copper was a mine that was well managed. And it's an operation that employed Papua New Guineans. There was no priority given to Bougainvillians. In fact, it was an open market for Papua New Guineans to be employed. Today, it's sad to say that landowners today are greedy, where they are saying we should be given priority over other Papua New Guineans. Bowenville Copper was the best in terms of the revenue being earned, and it was the best as employer of Papua New Guineans. There was no demarcation on who comes from where should be employed. So that's a issue that's a new development in terms of resource development in Papua New Guinea, where we are being greedy as landowners to take up employment. I think as a Bowenvillian, I demand that we basically give a level playing field to resource developers to be able to give in that open market to Papua New Guineans to be employed. As an example, Bowenville Copper is an example.
More after the break. Welcome back. We continue with the presentation by Mr. Sam Akoitai.
With his wealth of experience in being a minister who was instrumental in transforming the mining sector since taking office in 2002, this is what Mr. Akoitai had to say in his reflection of the mining industry.
When I got appointed, I said to Prime Minister, I can't take up this ministry because we, the people of Bowenville, we took up arms. I'll be in a position of conflict if I take up this ministry. And his very words, which I can still remember today, he said, I need ministers who can assist me to put the economy back on track. It has been derailed, and we need to fix the economy. And during the time, as I stated, the PNG kina was worth 18 US cents. You do your own research and maybe you can correct me if it was well above 50 cents. I tell you, it was 18 cents, 18 US cents. When I got appointed, the mining industry was a dying industry. Why? Misima was scheduled to shut down in 2003. Pogra was scheduled to shut down in 2006. Octeri was scheduled to shut down in 2009. And the exploration expenditure in the country before my term was well over 100 million US. When I took office as the Minister for Mining, it was below 10 million US when I took office. The exploration, in fact, it was, to be exact, it was 2 million US when I took office in 2002. The industry was a dying industry. And I'm actually proud to mention here today that one day when I was appointed, I was walking up to a NEC meeting in Morota, and this fine young economist met me, and his advice was, Sam, the cow that you are in charge of, the country, it's been providing the milk to this country, and this cow has no milk. It's crossing by no milk blown. The country is going to start milking its blood, and the cow will die. And I said, what is your advice? And he said, take that cow to a paddock that's got plenty of grass. And then he walks off. I'm proud that he's now the Chief of Staff of the Prime Minister's Department, Isaac Rupari. And on that advice, I decided that talk to the Prime Minister, talk to Bart Philemon. Bart Philemon, I can say is perhaps during my term, and this is my own assessment, was the best finance or treasury minister the Papua New Guinea ever had. Because with his leadership, he was able to say no in 800 different languages to any expenditure by the government. And that's the reason, that also assisted in putting the economy back on the right path. Having a minister there to say no, even to the Prime Minister, work within the budget. And I have a lot of respect for these Papua Indians who basically worked very hard to get the economy back from where it was in 2002 back to what it is now.
The strong growth in the mining and petroleum sectors has contributed to stable economic growth, which has seen an increase in budgetary allocations to areas such as DSIP from an initial 500,000 kina per district to the present 10 million kina allocation, and now the additional LLG SIP of 500,000 kina. With these increased proceeds from the resource sector, an ultimate challenge posed by Mr. Akoitai is the governance of benefits, especially from the resource sector, which he believes still needs to be better addressed by all levels of government.
What seems to actually drive government, provincial government, and the landowners to continue to say there is not much benefit of having a mine. And I can only conclude on one issue, and that is governance of benefits. Governance of benefits is an outstanding issue that has not been addressed at all levels, from the national government, provincial government, to the landowners. If we can only manage ourselves to actually deal with the governance of benefits, then we can then stand back and say, okay, I'm better managing the benefits that I'm getting from the mining companies or from the petroleum sector. Once somebody can stand up and with confidence stand in front of Papua New Guineans and say, we are better managing the benefits from the mining or from petroleum companies. Today, I'm telling you, governance of benefits is a problem that this country has at all levels.
In recognizing the work of the media, Mr. Akoitai praised the media for its role in reporting on important issues emanating from the resource sector. He also urged the media to continue to research important issues and to communicate them to ordinary citizens of PNG.
You have a very important role to play in the development of this country. Very important. Without your involvement in your reporting, this country would not have come this far. Your involvement in the industry is very important to Papua New Guineans and also the investors from outside. And that during my time as a minister and also a member of Parliament, I had a very good working relationship with the media. I was criticized, but I accept criticism because that only makes me to think. There are people outside who think see things that I don't see. I might have something on my set, but I can't see it because I don't have eyes everywhere. So your reporting is very important, and I encourage you to do your research on these issues, to go out and reach out to our ordinary Papua New Guineans.
The Bougainville experience, although now is history, provides an important lesson to PNG that resource ownership lies with the people. Hence, any arrangement involving the extraction of resources must bring people into the equation.
Coming up, we have Hugh Jones speak to us about mine closure. You're with Resource PNG. Our next guest is Hugh Jones, an expert of mine closure. Mr. Jones has been actively involved in mine closure matters for over 20 years, both as a regulator and a consultant. We speak to Mr. Jones on his personal story of how mine closure affected him and his family.
I have with me Hugh Jones, a world expert on mine closure. Hugh, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Hugh, why do mines close?
Basically, eventually, every mine runs out of economic resources. And therefore, the fate of every mine that ever opens in the world is that one day it will run out of resources and close.
Now, Hugh, you yourself have been personally affected by mine closures. What is your personal experience with mine
Yes,
closure?
I was directly affected, as was my extended family, by the closure of 256 coal mines in South Wales in the late 1950s through to the early 1970s. The effect on that and our family was dramatic. In my own personal case, I was faced with the choice of either remaining in the industry and moving somewhere else in the world, or else changing my job. We decided that I would stay in the mining industry, so my family and I moved 12,000 miles to Australia, which was the only place in the world I could get a job in 1969. My cousins, one of them moved to Canada to take up a position there, another one went to Zimbabwe, a third went to the Middle East for 5 years and then moved back to the UK. Two other cousins ended up changing their lifestyle and their jobs so that they could get work. And one cousin never worked again in the rest of his life. He lived on the welfare system. So yes, personally, it has hit me. It has caused me great upset, and yet I've survived.
But far-reaching impact by the sound of it.
Very far-reaching impact. The village that I lived in was a small village of around 2,000 people, and 30% of the people living in that village worked in the mine.
Goodness.
When the mine closed, we suddenly had an unemployment level of 30%. 3 of the 4 pubs in the village closed. All the shops in the village closed, and we then had to go and drive down to the next community about 10 miles away. And the community now, 45 years later, is about 70% the size it used to be, and no one works in the village. They all work somewhere else. So it becomes a dormitory community because there is no employment after the mine closed.
We'll touch more on impact a little bit later, but how do you manage mine closure?
Hopefully from the very beginning of the concept of the mine. That's becoming the modern approach. It certainly wasn't the approach 30, 40 years ago, but it's becoming much more now. So you actually look at the mine and you try to consider what it's going to look like when you finally extracted all the resource. And you make decisions about how the physical properties around the mine, the tailings facility, the waste dumps, the actual pit itself, if it's an open pit mine, where you're going to put your process plant. You make those decisions now so that come closure time, you cause the least upset and the least cost. It's very expensive to close down a mine if you've got no cash flow coming in and you have a lot of work to do. So it's much better to think ahead and plan ahead, and that's what seems to be happening much more in the industry.
Right. So let's go back to the social issues that arise surrounding mine closure. What are they, and how can we best handle them?
Well, for example, Ford has announced they're going to close down their Geelong factory in Melbourne in about 18 months. But the factory will still be there. And some other manufacturer can move into that factory and start producing something other than motor cars. So there's going to be some continuity. The infrastructure established around there is going to be used again. In the case of a mine, when you've depleted all the material you want, you've extracted all the available material, there's no alternative user to come in and employ anything like the same number of people in that place. You may get some small tourist activity and so on, but on a major scale, there's nobody going to replace the thousands of employees that the mine used to have. So that's a major social impact. What do you do with people when the mine closes? Now, traditionally, I'm going back 130 years or so, in Western Australia, the goldfields started up in Halls Creek, and they progressively worked down Australia, all down the coast. And the houses were wooden houses, and they were built so that there was a central corridor down the side, and they split them in half, and they put them on the ox carts, and towed them from one community to the other. It took several months to do that, but as the gold industry progressed, so the town followed them. We don't have that option today. We can't You can't physically pick up
No.
brick and tile houses and cart them to the next location. So it's a big challenge. From a strictly, purely social aspect of mine closure, fly-in, fly-out operations are much more socially manageable, because Dad still goes to the same airport. The fact that he flies to a different mine site doesn't matter too much, because the kids have got continuity in schooling and social aspects and so on. It's not everybody's approach to life, but in terms of closure, I can assure you that the trauma of actually having to see your family disintegrate and leave your community because the mine is closed, that's traumatic. It would have been much easier if we could have simply got on a different plane.
We'll be back with this interview after the break. Thanks for staying with us. We continue our interview with Mr. Hugh Jones on mine closure.
What about all the displaced people? Here in PNG, for instance, we have lots of landowner participation. Most of those mines are located in the remote rural areas where you have villages and you know, you've livelihood from the rivers that surround the mines. How would you, what's your advice on managing that?
It's a very difficult thing to manage. The social aspects of mine closure is the aspect that has not been rigorously pursued. We've done a lot of work on the physical aspects of mine closure. We've done a lot of work on the biological and ecological aspects of mine closure. But the social aspects have been allowed to look after themselves, if that's the correct phrase to use. And it's an extremely difficult challenge, particularly when you work in an area which is a developing country and the people were subsistence people prior to the mine coming. You bring the mine in, you teach them to live in a cash economy, they become used to living in a cash economy, and then one day the mine closes. You can't expect them to go back to being subsistence people.
No.
So we need to be able to replace that by something, and it's a serious challenge, which is why I say the fly-in, fly-out option from a social closure perspective has some attractions.
So how do you get something sustainable going from a closed mine?
Well, sustainability is a difficult thing. Some people believe that sustainability means that nothing ever changes again. But in practice, Mother Nature is not like that. It's a dynamic process. So what you try to do is to, first of all, stabilize all the physical aspects, the waste dumps and the tailings facilities and the open pits and so on. You try to get them to be stable so that they are not going to be catastrophic failures. Then you try to re-establish some ecosystem on that's a self-sustaining ecosystem. It's going to be dynamic. You start off with pioneer plant species and finally you end up with mature plants. That might take 50, 80, 100 years, depending on where you happen to be and the ecology that you're trying to establish. But you can do all of those things, and what you end up with is a land that is no longer capable of doing what it used to do before the mine was there. But it's not all darkness and gloom. It is actually a surviving ecological setup that is functioning in its own right.
So perhaps forward planning.
Oh, that's the key to everything. Yesterday when I was at the seminar, I was saying that you actually need to start planning for closure as soon as you realize you have a project. And I'm glad to say more and more mining companies are adopting that approach. There are some that we might call recalcitrant, but I'm sure peer pressure will come to bear on them. At least I sincerely hope it does.
Can you draw any comparisons between the Welsh or the Australian experience with the PNG experience?
Not really, because when you looked at what happened in South Wales, as I said, 256 mines closed in about a 15-year period. But there was a well-established social welfare system. And so that supported people while they got reorganized and resorted their lives. As I said, 4 of us left. So we weren't a drain on the public purse. But there was this buffer that allowed people to reorientate and get themselves organized. I don't see that parallel in many other countries in the world.
Hugh Jones, thank you for your time today.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you.
Hugh Jones, an expert in mine closure.
And that ends Resource PNG. If you have any comments or queries, do email us on this address, resourcepng@mtv.com.pg. Or to find out more, check MTV online. That's www.mtv.com.pg and go to our Resource PNG page. You can also check our page on Facebook for regular updates. Until the same time next week, have a pleasant evening.